So, good afternoon, everyone. This is Group 2, and we will be reporting on Introduction to Transportation Planning and Engineering. Now, before we get into the topic, let's take a brief look at the history of transportation and explain what a transportation system is. So, as defined by Institute of Transportation Engineers, transportation system can be summed up as the application of technology and scientific principles to the planning, functional design, operation management, and facilities for any mode of transportation to safe, rapid, comfortable, convenient, economical, and environmentally compatible movement of people and goods. So, in essence, transportation is a means of overcoming the geographical gap between activities. Transportation system supports everyday household activities, allowing people and companies to choose where to locate strategically and give labor mobility both to and from work. They promote economic efficiency by allowing regions to specialize in economic activities that they excel at, and they, of course, provide access to the emergency services. Now, prior to our modern roadways, it all goes through a series of evolutions initially. So, the first mode of transportation was by foot. This led to the development of footpaths. Then the next major progress in transportation was the use of animals. This led to the development of trackways as the loaded animals required more horizontal and vertical clearances. Then the inventions of the wheels in Mesopotamian civilizations that led to the development of animal drawn vehicles. Then later on, it became necessary that the road surface should be capable of carrying greater loads. Thus, road with a harder surface emerged. So the Romans were the first to construct an extensive system of roads radiating in many directions from Rome, since they recognized that the fundamentals of good road constructions were to provide good drainage, good materials, and good workmanship. So the roads at that time were constructed on a firm ground subgrade and strengthened with wooden piles when necessary. Then the Treseguet Road of French. It is the next major development in road construction that occurred during the regime of Napoleon Bonaparte. He developed a cheaper method of construction than the lavish and locally unsuccessful revival of Roman practice. Pavement used during that time was 200 mm pieces of quarried stone of a more compact form and shape, such that they had at least one flat side, which was placed on a compacted formation. Small pieces of broken stones were then compacted into spaces between large foundations to provide a level surface. Then the Telford in England. They proposed a similar type to that of the Treseguet in France. Sloping surface on the top was achieved by providing varying size of stones in the foundation. For lateral confinement, Telford used a block made of broken stones in lime water. And lastly, the macadam construction, the first scientific road construction method. John Macadam, a Scottish road builder, is considered the pioneer of modern road construction. Macadam came to realize that the 250 mm layers of well compacted broken angular stones would provide the same strength and stiffness and a better running surface than an expensive pavement founded on large stone blocks. So until what we have now are modern road. It follows the macadam construction method, but it uses bituminous concrete and cement concrete. It uses numerous innovative equipment and technologies to help enhance road building in a more effective and timely manner. So as a result, transportation plays an important part in our society. In fact, the measure of the development of any society is characterized by how developed the transportation system is. Advancement in transportations has made a vast change in the quality of life of people. The impact of transportation can be summarized as in terms of economic role, social role, political role, and environmental role. So, in terms of economic role, transportation serves as a medium in the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services which are inevitable without a transportation facilities. So in social role, the development of transportation system influences the formation of urban society. Now in political role, the world is divided to different political units for mutual protection and economic advantages, and the development of common culture is linked by the transportation of both goods and people through different modes. However, in environmental role, environment is highly affected by transportation, but more in a harmful way than in a good way. So, now that we understand the history of roads and transportation as well as their importance in society, let's take a look at the process behind the building of our transportation infrastructures.
What are the main factors we take into account when relocating to a community? Transportation. Now, among the numerous things that worry people, transportation is one of the most prevalent. Our responsibility is to offer infrastructure that provides comfort and to fulfill the needs of the populace and to spur the development. Looking at the current status of regional transportation, designing for future demands, and fusing of all the 12 elements of finances, goals and policies constitutes the process of transportation planning. By assessing everything from streets and highways to cargo ships to public transportation and bike lanes, it helps influence how a town or city expands. And in order to shape cities, enable economic activities and foster community connection, and improve quality of life, transportation planning is absolutely crucial. And assuring safe accessibility for everyone and all levels is also essential for long-term sustainability. Transportation planning. Transportation planning is the process of looking at the current state of transportation in the region, designing for future transportation needs, and combining all of that with the elements of budgets, goals, and policies. It helps shape how a community or city grows by evaluating everything from streets and highways to cargo ships and to public transit and bike lanes. It can influence everything from business and the creation of the quality of life.
There are two types of transportation planning: short term or medium term, and long term. Short term and medium term planning can be defined relatively in the same way. They are less complex and put on great demand on construction activities and require less capital expenditure. It means that it is the one with the lowest cost because it only covers 1 to 2 years for short term and 3 to 5 years for medium term. Unlike the long term planning, it is a complex problem and requires huge financial expenditure and involves large extensive construction programs which affect the environment in economic, social, and natural aspect. It requires the highest cost because it covers more than 5 years.
Basic elements of transportation planning.
The first one, we have transportation system database. Planning for transportation must begin with an understanding of the components of your transportation system as well as the state and functionality of these facilities. The majority of transit agencies provide a list of the many assets that make up a transit system, like buses, stations, shelters, and rail cars, and etc. The major responsibility for keeping the transportation system database currently typically rests with the transportation engineers and the planners concerned. And the second one, we have socio-economic and land use. Socio-economic and land use focus in transportation planning is on the supply of transportation and infrastructure and services to meet current or anticipated travel demand. Derived demand is a key idea in transportation planning that has a big impact on how such demand is calculated. Therefore, trip making must be related to the different activity kinds that take place in a given area as well as to the qualities of the trip making that will affect how these excursions are made. We have the third one, goals and objectives. Transportation systems relate to far bigger challenges than just giving people a way to get from one place to another. Goals are broad statements that describe the outcomes that a transportation plan is intended to attain. Objectives are more detailed statements that explain how these aims will be accomplished. Goal and objective setting is very essential because it establishes the evaluation standards that will be applied later in the planning phase and to compare the relative effects of various projects and the methods. In the fourth, identify deficiencies and opportunities. The goal of transportation planning is to identify and prioritize those parts of the transportation system that are currently problematic or will become problematic as travel demands rises. Planning for transportation can also spot locations with serious issues where alterations in the system may offer chances for the improvement of operational efficiency. There are many different ways to find these deficiencies and the possibilities.
Fifth basic element of transportation planning is develop and analyze alternatives. Once the planning process identifies areas where improvements are needed, transportation planner determine different strategies that could solve the problem. The purpose of this is to estimate how each of the proposed alternatives would perform under present and future conditions. Planners are looking at a wide variety of strategies. For example, strategies that own improvements to highways, such as adding new lanes, improving traffic control through signals or signing, or improving traffic flow through channelization. This element also involves the use of mathematical models for estimating travel demand. The number of persons or vehicles that will use the system is determined, and this result expressed in vehicles or person per hour serve as the basis for project design. The sixth basic element of transportation planning is evaluate alternatives. Evaluation brings together all the information gathered on individual alternatives. One of the most used approach is the benefit-cost ratio, which compares the alternatives of the basis of discounted benefits and costs. The purpose of this evaluation phase is to determine how well each alternative will achieve the objectives of the project as defined by the criteria. The performance data produced in the analysis phase are used to compute the benefit and cost that will result if the project is selected. The benefit-cost ratio for each project is calculated to show the extent to which the project would be a sound investment. The seventh basic element is the implement plan. It is the major product of transportation planning process. Project selection is made after considering all the factors involved. Another major product of transportation planning is the programming document. This document is called the TIP, or the Transportation Improvement Program, and these are the transportation projects that will be implemented over the next few years. In a simple situation, for example, where the project has been programmed and is in the design phase, a single criterion such as cost might be used and the chosen project would be one with the lowest cost. The eighth basic element of transportation planning is the monitor system performance. Transportation planning is a process that continually examines the performance and condition of the transportation system to identify which improvements can be made. Transportation planning has begun to incorporate the result of management systems that are aimed at a specific network issue. For example, most state transportation agencies have pavement management system. Other agencies include bridge management system, safety management system, and congestion management system. And construction activities and require less capital expenditure. It means that it is the one with the lowest cost because it only covers 1 to 3 years for short term and 3 to 5 years for medium term. Unlike the long term planning, it is a complex problem and requires huge financial expenditure and involves large extensive construction programs, which affect the environment in economic, social, and natural aspects. It requires the highest cost because it covers more than 5 years. Importance of transportation planning. Transportation system requires a continuous planning to optimally satisfy the mobility requirement of the society. Planning becomes significant when the resources available are limited and requirements are higher. The main objectives of planning is to optimally utilize the available resources in the best possible way and in a very systematic manner. So, transportation planning is highly essential in shaping cities, enabling economic activities, promoting community interaction, and enhancing quality of life. One importance of transportation planning is the growth in the demand for mobility, where it gives considerable growth of transport demand, larger quantities for passenger and freight being moved, and longer distance over which they are carried. Transportation planning is necessary to ensure that hazards and conditions are routinely fixed and are made up to standards in order to guarantee the safety of those on the roads.
Most people spend about an hour traveling to and from work, not to mention all the other traveling we do. But despite all the work engineers put into making those journeys go smoothly, it seems like things go wrong. Maybe you've been delayed at the airport, encountered signaling issues on the subway, or got caught in a traffic jam. While the weather often plays a role, one of the biggest reasons that transportation systems run into issues is that they have to deal with another persistent, difficult, and avoidable elements, us. If you want to design a good transportation system, you have to understand the people who are going to use it. Transportation engineering is a branch of civil engineering that is involved in the planning, design, operation, and maintenance of safe and efficient transportation systems. These systems include roadways, railways, waterways, and intermodal operations. Typically, the demand is the amount of traffic, which are people, cars, rail cars, and barges, that is expected to use a particular transportation facility, while the supply is the quantity and type of infrastructure's components such as roadways, bridges, pavements, etc. So that means every highway, railroads, shipping lane, and airline route relies on transportation engineers to guide the way. Suppose you were tasked with setting up a subway system for a city. You'll need to plan, design, and construct every last element before it can function. What's more, transportation systems are almost by definition heavily connected. Every piece needs to support all the others. And once a system is up and running, you need constantly monitor how it copes with demand. That will help you make decisions like how to improve access to stations and how often to run trains. The physical aspects of engineering we've learned about so far play a big part of the design work. You need to build components out of the right materials and put in the right safety features. For example, you want to build the subway track with enough mechanical strength to avoid buckling because of an overloaded train. And the key element in transportation engineering is people. We're a core part of the system. Unlike other disciplines we've looked at, this kind of engineering isn't about processing inanimate materials into something that we use or consume. It is about moving people in a way that is safe, convenient, and comfortable. That means considering social requirements in addition to physical ones. But, like everything else in engineering, cost is one of the biggest constraints you have to work with. Since you probably have fixed budget for setting up the system, you need to prioritize what to build and where. And to do that, you have to understand what kinds of journeys are going to be made. So, with the subway, some people will want to visit their friends or go shopping, while others are just trying to get to work. The layout needs to support those different needs, while making enough from the passenger fares to keep the system up and running. So the social and economic goals of your city have a big role in the design of the network. In general, transportation engineering is often about taking a bunch of different priorities and combining them in the best but rarely perfect way. Importance of transportation engineering. There are a number of attributes of transportation engineering that affects the types of statistical theory that are used in the profession. One important aspect of transportation engineering is that the transportation engineer is not only interested in the infrastructures and the individual units, such as cars, trucks, rail cars, that use the infrastructure, but also the user. So, transportation engineering and planning are concerned with the movement of people and goods by means of highways, rail, air, water, and information technology. Presently, urban and intermodal means of transportation are high development priorities. Transportation has played a crucial role historically in connecting countries and continents. However, promoting economic and social integration of the various regions of the world. All forms of transportation influence our lives and raise environmental, health, and safety issues. Transportation is intimately interwoven with the daily lives of individuals and organizations in our society. It is easy to overlook its significance until it fails in some way.